Hi there. Dr. Bill Crawford here, psychologist, speaker, author of 7 books, host of 2 PBS specials, and welcome to my in-depth program on living life from the top of the mind. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time because when I go and present my system to organizations or CEOs or even individuals, they go, "Bill, this is great, but man, this is a lot of information." And of course, life is complicated. I want to just kind of give you a bumper sticker. Don't worry, be happy, don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. Because life is more complicated than that. And so it needs, I think, a system that we can use anywhere, anytime, with our kids, with our spouse, with our employees, with our employers, with our friends, in traffic, all over life. So this is something that I've created. Spent the last 27 years creating the system. Matter of fact, I have a book called Life from the Top of the Mind that kind of goes through this system. If you don't already have this book, or if you haven't seen me present my material, I would encourage you to get it. You can get it from Amazon, you can get it from my website, BillCrawfordPh.com, or just Google Bill Crawford Ph.D. I'll come up on the first page. The good news about the book is I get to go into more detail here than I'm going to be able to do in these short videos. So if you don't have the book, I encourage you to get it. It will be a wonderful companion to this process. So as I've said, people have said, man, this is a lot of information, and I've always wanted a program where people can go deep diving into all this information and really apply it to every aspect of their life. We have broken my system down into 22 steps, and each one of them I'm going to give you a short video, kind of an introduction, and then a to-do, something that you actually do to apply it to your life. And the idea is to build on your knowledge and your practice and your expertise until you are living life from the top of the mind, until you find yourself kind of not needing this material anymore because it's just become a part of your own philosophy and your own system. So, if you like that, that is what this is all about. And for those of you who have seen me before, there's going to be a little bit of a review here. People tell me that they hear things the second time, they didn't get the first. I won't be able to do the whole thing like a 3-hour or half-day or a full-day presentation. I'm going to try to keep these videos short. For those of you who haven't seen me before, again, I do encourage you to get the book because I'm going to try to give you enough information to use this material. It's just that there is a lot more to it, and you would be well served to get the book or to contact me and I can help you with this. So let's jump in. I always like to make sure we are working with real life. So I want you to download this particular form. It says real life on it. It's a PDF. And then when you get it, what I want you to do is write down what are some of those problem triggers, what are those situations in the past that have triggered your stress, your frustration, anything that gets in the way of your clarity, confidence, and creativity. This isn't going to be just a course on stress management, but I do want to start with stress because most people will say that or frustration or annoyance or depression, worry, feeling overwhelmed often gets in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity, gets in the way of us coming from the top of the mind. So download this, make this list as comprehensive as possible. Talk about familial or personal situations that have triggered your stress, frustration, anger, resentment. Talk about professional situations. It can be as mundane as traffic. You want to make this list as comprehensive as possible because we want to make sure we are applying my material to your real life situations. So once you have made your list of any situation in the past or you think in the future that has triggered your stress, then you want to make a list of what that stress looks like and feels like. What's the behavior? What's the thought? What's the emotion? Because we don't want to just focus on stress. I'm going to call all of this stress. But it could be frustration, it could be anger, it could be resentment, it could be depression, it could be feeling overwhelmed, it could be worried, annoyed. Any of that you want to make sure you list here because again we want to make sure we apply my material to your real life situation. So go do that now, download this, and we'll start with step 2. Okay, so now you've got your list of the problems, the triggers, anything that has triggered your stress in the past and what that stress looks like. By the way, I hope you read the notes that basically said leave this blank, this left box blank for the moment. So now what we want to do is recognize kind of how these two experiences are linked. Have you noticed that when we experience this, when this happens, it triggers this reaction? Which would be bad enough if it stopped there, but have you noticed that it doesn't? Because when this situation triggers this reaction, have you noticed the situation seems to get worse? The traffic seems to get worse. The kids seem to be more problematic. Difficult people seem more difficult, which triggers another reaction, which of course makes it seem worse, which triggers another reaction, it makes it seem worse, reaction and worse, reaction and worse, and we and those around us find ourselves trapped in this cycle. This is problematic because it's not just one situation that then gets in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity. It's the fact that we are trapped in this cycle. So what we want to do is break this cycle. And I want to make sure I'm bringing you some new information on this. When I do my presentation, I call it New Information on the Science of Dealing with Stress and People in Life. We're calling it life from the top of the mind because it's the entire system. But I want you to know it is new information. For those of you who remember seeing me, you may remember this quote from Albert Einstein. It says, "Problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them." See, I think that's so important because I think it speaks to why we might find ourselves trapped in this cycle. We may be trying to solve the problem at the same level of awareness that created it. In other words, when we see stress, frustration, anger as the problem, and this as the cause, the problem is the cause or the trigger is the cause, then we go over here and try to change this so we won't feel this. Ever try to change difficult people or traffic or even kids sometimes? Have you noticed they don't say thank you for sharing when you try to change them? It just kind of has us feeling more and more problematic. And it would be one thing if this frustration, this resentment, this anger actually helped us deal with the situation, but it makes the situation seem worse. We find ourselves trapped in that cycle. So what I like to do is come from a different perspective on stress. There's a quote that I came up with about this. It goes like this. Stress is a signal something needs to change. Suffering is when we don't make the change. Stress is a signal. Frustration, anger, resentment is a signal something needs to change. Suffering is when we don't make the change. I like that because it begins to have us, allowed us to use these reactions not as something that's the problem we have to get rid of, but as a valuable signal, kind of like a little red light that goes on our dashboard. So what we want to do is understand this perspective from a new perspective. We want to bring new information to all of this. The quote from Albert Einstein, "Problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them." I want to help you raise your level of awareness of what's going on here so that you can break that cycle. My new information has to do with how the brain processes information. Let me show you what I mean. Most people have heard we've got basically three parts to the brain. Lower part of the brain is called the brainstem. This is where our fight or flight responses are located. It's the part of the brain that regulates our muscle tension, heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, etc. Middle part of the brain is called the limbic system. This is where our emotions are triggered for the most part, but it's also the part of the brain that acts as a gatekeeper. This is what most people don't know. It also acts as a scanner, a processor, a router. It scans incoming data, processes it or interprets it, and then either routes it down to the brainstem or up to the upper 80% of the brain, what I call the top of the mind, the neocortex, where we have access to our interpersonal skills, problem-solving skills, clarity, confidence, creativity, compassion, etc. So again, this is how it works. Data comes in from our five senses. It is first scanned by the limbic system. If the limbic system doesn't see a problem, the brainstem just works in the background, neocortex is making all the decisions, we're all good. But if the limbic system senses anything or anyone it doesn't like, anything or anyone it has determined to be a problem or trigger or stressor or threat of any kind, it sends the data immediately down to the brainstem, bypassing the neocortex. Now, at this point, the brainstem can only do two things, fight or flight, which means blood pressure goes up, muscle tension goes up, heart rate goes up. We get ready to strike out or withdraw, that fight or flight response you've heard so much about. Great in a fight or flight situation, if somebody's throwing some ball at our head and we catch it at our peripheral vision, we'll duck without having to think about it. So anytime you need to deal with a situation in a way where you don't have to think about it, this is the perfect part of the brain to go to. The problem is we're going to this reactive brain in situations where we need access to our interpersonal skills, problem-solving skills, clarity, confidence, creativity, etc. And here's something most people also don't know. They don't know that this blood pressure, muscle tension, heart rate are all driven by certain chemicals. This is a chemical change in our brain and our body. Chemicals, for the most part, are adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol. Don't really need to remember exactly what they are other than this reaction, this stress, frustration, anger is all driven by these chemicals. When we try to deal with life from this perspective, life seems to get worse. The limbic system goes, whoa, more negative data, didn't mean for that to happen, sends it right back down to the brainstem. And can you see how now this internal cycle is replicated from this external cycle? That is the problem. We are trapped in this lower 20% of the brain, because it's not like this happens every once in a while. This can become a lifestyle for us, and we find ourselves trapped in this lower 20% of the brain. So what we've got to do is regain control. A lot of people like to regain control, but they try to control the situation so they won't feel bad. That has a tendency to tie our peace of mind to another person's state of mind. You never want to do that. You never want to tie your peace of mind to another person's state of mind. So when I'm talking about regaining control, I'm talking about our neocortex, this upper 80% of the brain, the top of the mind, regaining control from the brainstem, that lower brain. Now, the brainstem controls breathing, and that is one thing we can control. The brainstem controls heart rate and blood pressure, but that's hard to control. Breathing is not hard to control. That's why if you've ever done any stress management or yoga or meditation, breathing is always part of the process. But most people don't know why they're doing it, and therefore it feels like, well, yeah, I'm just taking a deep breath, and what does that do? Here's what it does. Normally the brainstem controls breathing, but when we breathe slowly and deeply, using either the 5x5 method or the 4-4-4 method. That means you inhale for a count of 5, exhale for a count of 5, slowly, deeply. Or you inhale for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4. You have the neocortex, this upper 80% of the brain, actually taking over, regaining control from the brainstem, taking over a function normally controlled by the brainstem. Now, if you'll use the word relax on the exhale, in addition to this, you also deal with another component the brainstem normally controls, which is muscle tension. So if you do the breathing while you're counting, there's only one part of the brain that can count, and then use the word relax on the exhale, you have this neocortex, top of the mind, taking over, literally taking over two functions normally controlled by the brainstem and regaining control. Kind of looks like this. Relax. Now, if you do that 2 times or 10 times, however many times you need to feel centered and is in control, you will be making a difference in your life because you have this upper 80% of the brain, the neocortex, regaining control from the brainstem. So, your to-do is to go out and practice this. People tell me they are amazed at how just doing this makes such a difference in their life. This is going to be a foundational piece for everything we do going forward. So you want to go out and practice this. Practice in traffic. Practice when you're dealing with difficult people. Maybe not to their face, but excuse yourself, go to another room. You want to be able to do this in a way that allows your neocortex to regain control from your brainstem, and you want to get a sense of how this works in your life. So go out and practice it. Record the results. It's really important that you notice how this serves you and how this works for you. Don't worry if there's some little thoughts that kind of creep in while you're doing that. Just keep focusing on your breathing. Use the word relax on the exhale, and this will work because what it is, again, is having that top of the mind regain control from the bottom of the mind. Do that, and we'll go to step 3. Okay, so now hopefully you have a sense of what it's like to be able to have that neocortex regain control from the brainstem. The breathing, using the word relax on the exhale while you're counting, that allows that neocortex to regain control, and this is very powerful. However, it is somewhat similar to other things you've probably heard about. This is where most programs stop. We are just getting going. Because what you've just done is dealt very nicely with the physiological aspects of stress. Let's move on to what I call the psychological aspects of stress. The first one is our tendency to ask what I call BS questions. BS stands for brainstem, by the way. Like, what is wrong with these people? Why don't they listen? Or, why do I always get behind the slowest person on the road? Or some people will say, man, what is wrong with me? Why do I let these people get to me? You know, I should be handling this better. Questions are very powerful. They're like Google on steroids because they engage a very specific part of the brain. When we ask BS, brainstem questions, we engage the brainstem. So what we want to do is breathe. Use the word relax on the exhale as we're counting and ask what I call neocortex or top of the mind questions. questions. Neocortex questions are questions that can only be answered by the upper 80% of the brain. I'm going to give you a lot of those during this whole process, but there are 4 very powerful ones that I want to give you now so you can start using immediately. And the cool thing about these questions is you can use them to determine whether or not you want to hang on to any of those old reactions, because I'm not saying you have no right to feel that, or you shouldn't feel that, or you're wrong for feeling that. And if you decide, no, I don't, that's going to help you change. So here they are. The first one is, number 1, was this thought, emotion, or action chosen on purpose? Most people say they don't get stressed, frustrated, angry, resentful on purpose. That would probably be a no. Second one's a good old Dr. Phil question. How's it working for me? You know, is this helping me create the life I want? Most people say no. I don't like being stressed, frustrated, resentful, angry, etc. The third one is very interesting. I love it. Is this making the statement I want to make about who I am? Is this how I want to be defined? Because when we say blank makes me blank, when we say difficult people drive me crazy, traffic really frustrates me, my kids drive me nuts, whenever we say this makes us this, what we're actually saying is the difficult people and the difficult situations we encounter have the power to define us or control us. And I don't know about you, but I do not want those situations, those people to have that kind of power in my life. So if we don't want them to have that kind of power, we've got to take on the power ourselves. And I think we can use these questions. Number 1, am I doing it on purpose? Is it working for me? Is it defining me the way I want to be defined? And the fourth one, I love the fourth one, would I teach this way of being to someone I love? I have yet to meet anyone that would teach someone they love on purpose to be stressed and frustrated and angry and resentful. If you got children, would you teach your child that? So these are what I call the 4 criteria. And we can use them to determine whether we want to hang on to any of those old reactions or change them. And if we want to change them, what do we want to change them to? We can say, nope, I'm not doing this on purpose. It's not working for me. It's not making the statement I want to make about who I am. And no, I would never teach this to someone I love. So let's flip those questions. What if I were dealing with this particular situation on purpose? So I look at one of the triggers, kind of get your list out. Look at one of the triggers that you wrote down, specifically ones that really bug you. And let's assume you were dealing with it on purpose, deliberately, in a way that was more effective, in a way that defined who you are. I am a person that deals with traffic like this, in a way you would teach to those you love. What would that look like? Let's see, this isn't just about stopping stress. Matter of fact, my philosophy really isn't about stopping, it's about starting. I have a quote that says, creating the life you want isn't about what you're stopping, it's about what you're starting. Because in order to stop something, we have to worry that if we don't stop it, something bad will happen. That throws us into the brainstem. But when we're choosing qualities and characteristics that we want to bring to life, that define who we are in a way we would teach to those we love, that is what we're starting. But we've got to know what that looks like first. So get out your list, and on the box on the left, the one that was blank, write down the qualities and characteristics you want to bring to life. Clear, confident, creative, compassionate, kind, considerate, confident, happy, joyful, flexible, high integrity, good listener, whatever it is, whatever you would teach to someone you love. How do you want to be defined? What is your highest purpose here in making this happen? So write these down over here, and then what we're going to do is actually bring those to life by imagining going into one of these situations with one of these qualities and characteristics. If I were going into traffic and my kids were sitting in the back saying, hey, Mom, Dad, teach me how to be in traffic, what would that look like? If I were going in and talking to a difficult person in a way where I was defining who I am, not being defined by their difficult behavior, what would that look like? So you got to be able to imagine that. Now some people go, well, Bill, that's not real, that's just your imagination. Well, for those of you who've seen my seminars or read my books, you know I talk about what it's like to imagine biting into a lemon. And most people go, whoa, man, they could have a reaction, a physiological reaction. That's actually a chemical change in your body. And one of the things we're doing in this process is actually changing the chemical makeup of our body. This isn't just a psychological exercise, it's a physiological change in our body. The breathing, the relaxing, the asking the 4 criteria, those neocortex questions. And then imagine bringing those to life. You got to be able to imagine doing it before you can do it in real life. So take your list, and your to-do is to take your list and to begin to think about what it would be like to choose 1 or 2 of these qualities and characteristics and imagine bringing those to life as if that were the most important thing you are doing. Don't make this change so that you can be that way. We don't want our peace of mind tied to their state of mind. We want to be able to bring our best to life regardless of the situation. So do that, notice the change, record your results, and we will go on to step 4. All right, I hope you have your list of triggers and old reactions and your new list that match the 4 criteria, because this is huge. This is the foundation for our ability to bring our best to life. We first have to identify what that looks like and be able to imagine bringing that to life. Now, if you'll notice, the model: breathe, relax, ask, imagine, and then notice. That spells brain. I like my models to spell things. You would not believe how long it took me to make it spell brain. But I like you to have a model that is all about changing what we're changing. We're changing the chemical makeup of our body by switching from the brainstem to the neocortex and then learning about how to stay there. So what I want you to do now is go out and practice the brain model. I want you to not just do it in your imagination, I want you to do it in real life and record the results. Write down what works, what didn't. Feel free to send me any emails or communicate with me in a way that lets me help you with this if you want. But the idea is to take the breathe, relax, ask how I want to be feeling based on the 4 criteria: purposeful, effective, defines me in a way that I would teach to someone I love. Now you want to be able to imagine doing that, notice the change. You want to take this model into real life, practice it, and record the results. The good news is we will get better at anything we practice. So we want to begin to have this start to become familiar and comfortable, which means you want to practice all the time. Do that, and we'll move to step 5. All right. So now you've got your real life experience. You have applied the brain model to it in your imagination. You've gone out and practiced that in real life. You've got some recorded results. Now you're able to take part 1 and kind of put it into perspective. I told you this was a complete system, and I want you to be able to walk away from this experience with a map of the system on 1 page. So download this map. You're going to see it's got part 1, part 2, part 3. It's not divided that way, but you'll see when part 1 comes up. I want you to be able to fill in part 1. So grab your thing, download it, and then I'll show you how to fill it in. Okay, so now you've got your blank map. You'll notice the very beginning has the problem and the reaction. So we want to raise our level of awareness of what's going on. Sometimes I call this the awareness map or the brain map. Our awareness of, okay, when I find myself reacting to life, I create this cycle and I can get trapped in there. But what does that mean? You know, there's a person by the name of Viktor Frankl who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about going into situations with meaning and purpose. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we've got to make sure we are assigning meaning in a way that's very purposeful. So a lot of people look at that cycle and go, yeah, man, traffic drives me crazy, and that's what it means. What we want it to mean is this, and I want you to write this above the picture of the brain and below the picture of the brain in that second box. I want you to write this: my limbic system and brainstem are controlling my reactions and limiting my clarity, confidence, and creativity. Write that in that second box, because by the way, when we write something down, it goes to a certain part of the brain. So that's why I'm wanting you to write this in there. My limbic system and brainstem are controlling my reactions and limiting my clarity, confidence, and creativity. Good information. Write that down now. Okay, so now what do our negative reactions mean? Do they mean we're being made to feel a certain way by certain situations, or can they be a valuable signal? So what I want you to write under negative reactions is this. Negative reactions are a signal that I need to change what part of my brain is in control. So negative reactions are a signal that I need to change what part of my brain is in control. Write that down. Okay, so now you've got the old reactions, you got the cycle, you got what it means, our new interpretation. Limbic system and brainstem are controlling my reactions, limiting my clarity, confidence, and creativity. Good information. And my stress, my frustration, my anger, my resentment isn't what I'm being made to feel by somebody or something. It is a valuable signal, kind of like that signal on the dashboard, right? It's part of the solution, it's not part of the problem. Now, if the answer to these questions is no, my limbic system and brainstem aren't doing this, and this isn't a valuable signal, somebody's making me feel this way, well, I'm sorry I can't help you. I'm afraid you're going to stay trapped in that cycle. But if the answer is yes, you now have a model for how to do this. So in the box below, I want you to write this. At the very left, I want you to put a big old B and write breathe deeply, and then either 5 by 5 or 4, 4, 4. So this is the first step in the model. B is for breathe deeply, 5 by 5, 4, 4, 4. Write that in. And then next, write a big R. That is for relax on the exhale, deals with muscle tension. So the big R is for relax on the exhale. And remember, these two, B and R, deal very nicely with the physiological aspects of stress. Let's look at the psychological aspects of stress. We want to ask ourselves neocortex questions versus brainstem questions, like, is this purposeful? Am I doing it on purpose? Is it effective? Is it defining me in the way I want to be defined? Would I teach this to someone I love? Most of the time when we look at our old reactions, the answer is going to be no, but we want to come up with, okay, what would I be doing if the answer was yes? If I were dealing with this situation on purpose, in a way that's effective, in a way that does define me, in a way I would recommend to someone I love, what would that look like? Remember that list you wrote down? Now you want to imagine being that way. You want to be able to bring those qualities and characteristics into those trigger situations in your imagination. And then, that's what the I is for, imagine being that way. And then the N is notice the change. So write the N down and then notice the change. Because I want you to be able to notice how you feel differently at the end of part 1 than you did when you were trapped in the cycle. Should be a major difference. Practice this, record your response, make sure you have a real clear sense of what the entire part 1 looks like and feels like, and we will move to part 2, which is how to stay in this upper 80% of the brain regardless of the situation. Practice this, record your results. See you in part 2.